Well, I was looking for a short video I could do at the end of the week, and then I looked in my diary and saw it's St. Patrick's Day on Sunday. It's a little bit late, but I thought, what an opportunity for a little bit of a writer's list. I'm going to go through some books, but I'm going to talk more about the writers because it's a list, of course, of Irish writers. I couldn't let this pass. I have a lot of Irish ancestry myself. So I wanted to have a look at some writers that you probably know are Irish, some writers that perhaps you didn't know were Irish. And the writers I'm talking about are writers that I have read. So forgive me if I have left any out that you love. I will do some honourable mentions at the end, but do let me know if there's any Irish writer you love that I have missed out. Right, let's get going. Now, as usual, starting with the earliest, let's talk about Jonathan Swift, who is, of course, best known for his satirical novel, Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels was first published in 1726, which was a kind of fantastical satire on human nature and the genre of travellers' tales. What about Jonathan Swift himself? Well, he was born in 1667 in Dublin. Some interesting information about his family tree, and of course, as a professional genealogist as well as a writer, this is interesting for me as both. His grandmother, Elizabeth Dryden, was the niece of Sir Erasmus Dryden, who was the grandfather of the poet John Dryden. That same grandmother's aunt was the first cousin of Elizabeth, wife of Sir Walter Raleigh. His uncle Thomas Swift married a daughter of the poet and playwright Sir William Davenant, who was godson of William Shakespeare. Those are some interesting relations, and don't ask me to tell you what the exact relationships is, but basically he had some pretty interesting first, second, third cousins, once removed, twice removed, whatever. As well as Gulliver's Travels, he also wrote works called A Tale of a Tub, An Argument Against Abolishing Christianity. Beg your pardon. A Modest Proposal, and he is known as probably one of the most well-known satirists in English literature, and so much so that some satires have been subsequently termed Swiftian. And he later in life became the Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. So there you are. If you've never read Gulliver's Travels, it's interesting. It's quite fun to read. It's strange, fantastical, as I said. And if you like that kind of thing and you're happy to read something written in the early 18th century, is quite a fun read. Well, come up if you want to. Come on, up you come. Up. Oh, there we are. This is who has been complaining at my feet just now, which she does when I start talking to the camera and she thinks there's somebody up here that she doesn't know about. There, it's just me talking to myself. Yeah. Now, probably one of the best known Irish writers in literature is, of course, Oscar Wilde. And I fairly recently read The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is a strange and rather horrifying story of a man who keeps a portrait in his attic of himself that ages while he doesn't, and allows him to lead a degenerate life. It's quite an extraordinary read. So if you haven't read that, that's one to go on your list. But of course, Oscar Wilde is also well known for writing many plays, one of which is one of my favourite films of all time, the film of The Importance of Being Earnest. If you've never seen the 1952 film version of The Importance of Being Earnest with Dame Edith Evans, with a wonderful cast including Michael Redgrave, Michael Dennison, Joan Greenwood, Dorothy Tewton and Margaret Rutherford, you must get that film. It's one of my favourite films ever. It still makes me laugh. Full of absolutely sparkling, witty, wonderful lines. One of my favourite from that play is, "I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train." And of course, other wonderful plays include Lady Windermere's Fan, An Ideal Husband, A Woman of No Importance. He's known as one of the wittiest playwrights in drama history. His writing, his plays still come across as fresh today, I think. He was born in 1854 in Dublin again, and very, very sadly was convicted of what was then called gross indecency, which of course being gay then, 19th century and right up until very late in the 20th century, being gay was a criminal offence, and he spent some time in jail, and then he went to Paris and ended his years in Paris basically in a kind of exile. So a sad end to an absolutely brilliant life. He died in 1900 in Paris. I think if he'd been alive today, rather than being exiled and a criminal, he'd probably be now a national treasure. Wonderful, wonderful, witty writer. Now, a writer that you might not know as being Irish was Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula. One of my favourite horror, well, if not my absolute favourite horror book. I absolutely love Dracula. He was born, again, in a suburb of Dublin in 1847. And he had quite a life before he wrote Dracula. In fact, for a long time, he was actually very involved in the theatre, which I find of interest, of course. Might have a theatrical background. He was a theatre reviewer and also became personal assistant to the actor Sir Henry Irving. He later became the business manager of the Lyceum Theatre in London. And he liked to travel a lot, and it was while he was staying at Whitby in Yorkshire that he got the idea for Dracula, of course, because that's where Dracula famously lands when he comes to England. Dracula was published in 1897, and Bram Stoker died not that long afterwards in 1912. So he never knew just how popular the vampire genre would become. The countless films, books, plays. Basically, he started a whole genre of literature which is still going strong and still very, very popular. Now, another Irish-born writer that you will often hear me banging on about, of course, is C.S. Lewis. But I'm not going to hold up The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe for once. Some of you probably know, but some of you may not know, that he also wrote some adult fiction, including, there was a trilogy, and the first of which is Out of the Silent Planet, which is basically a science fiction novel set, I think, on Venus, if I remember rightly. Again, it's one of those books I read a long time ago. 2 men sought to plunder a planet, a third was offered as hostage to the unknown. brilliantly imaginative picture of life on another world, out of the silent planet, mirrors the inhumanities of man and contrasts a civilization of harmony and peace with the discord on Earth today, and published in 1938. And also another book of his that I have read was The Screwtape Letters, which is a satirical novel about one of the devil's administrators writing letters to his nephew to tell him how to secure man's damnation. It's very satirical, but quite fun to read. C.S. Lewis was born, for once, not in Dublin. So many writers seem to have been born in Dublin. Some of my ancestors were born in Dublin too. But he was born in Belfast, most well known for the Chronicles of Narnia, and he grew up loving animals and nature and the coast of Ireland, where a lot of the Narnia books are kind of based, particularly, I believe, Cair Paravel, the castle in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, is based on the coast of Ireland, around there. Of course, we know that he was very much a Christian, and that comes out in his writing. You do not have to be a Christian to read his works and to enjoy them and to get a lot out of them. He also, as probably many of you know, he was a great friend of J.R.R. Tolkien, and they were in a group of writers in Oxford called the Inklings. They used to meet at the Eagle and Child pub in Oxford and talk about writing, and Tolkien and Lewis would read each other's works and encourage each other. And of course, he was, like Tolkien, he was a lecturer in Oxford. There have been some biographies of C.S. Lewis, but he also wrote an autobiographical book called Surprised by Joy, which I have read. And of course, Joy also refers to his wife, Joy Davidson, who died of cancer only 4 years after they were married. Lewis himself died in 1963. He's buried at Poets' Corner in Westminster, quite rightly. So, one of my favourite children's writers, but you should look for his adult works too. They are good reads. I have a female Irish writer now, and we're in the land of living writers. I believe she's still with us, and this is Edna OBrien, the author of August is a Wicked Month. Basically, best known for writing books about women in a period during the 1960s, in a period when, particularly in Ireland, there was still a very, very kind of repressive attitude, particularly towards women. She wrote very openly about sex and social issues. Not surprisingly, many of her books were banned in Ireland. But I read this, August is a Wicked Month, quite a long time ago. And you can see the kind of things she writes about from the back. Ellen was alone, separated from her husband. Even her son had to be shared. Alone in London. And London was a place of loneliness and frustration, a place that denied her a past and offered her no future. So Ellen went south in search of sun and sex. But is it ever quite as easy as that? So Edna OBrien, she was born in County Clare in the west of Ireland. And as well as writing novels, she's also written plays and poetry. So an interesting writer. I don't think we hear a lot about her nowadays. You know, very much kind of part of the 60s. But certainly interesting, and quite probably another person I should have put on my list for Women's History Month, for her as a female writer and a writer about women. So a good one for March, that one. Now, coming more up to date, my next Irish writer is much more sort of popular fiction, if you like. Maran Keys was born in 1963 in Limerick, and she is also a radio presenter. And I've seen her sometimes on television doing various things. The one book I have read of hers is The Brightest Star in the Sky, which is about a group of people living in a block of flats in Dublin. And there's a strange narrator who you don't quite know who or what they are. They kind of observe these people, and we see their lives and their stories. So it's quite an interesting novel. It does have some mixed reviews on Goodreads. So for some people, this might not be their favourite Maran Keys book, but for me, it's the only one I've read of hers, and I quite enjoyed it. But yes, for a contemporary Irish writer and sort of fairly light but good reads, then Maran Keys is certainly one to look out for. And finally, one of my favourite people in the entertainment world today is the actor, comedian, television presenter, and lately novelist Graham Norton. And one of the books I have read of his is Holding, which was also made into a television series a couple of years ago. Of course, mostly we know Graham. I think he first came onto our screens in the sitcom Father Ted. And then he presented comedy shows on television, and for many years now has presented his own show, the Graham Norton Show, where he interviews stars of screen, stage, music. And he is such a brilliant chat show host. And I think also one of the reasons that he is such a good novelist as well is that he really has a kind of instinctive understanding of human nature. I really enjoyed this novel, and also one day when I was about a year ago and I wasn't feeling too well, I just spent the whole day in bed and I listened to his novel A Keeper on Audible just for the whole day, and I just loved it. It was even though I wasn't feeling well, it was just one of my favourite days because I just so loved that novel, and such an insight into people's psyche. And this one is kind of more of a whodunit. It's set in the little Irish village of Duneen, and a body is found at the local farm, and it opens up the past and all the locals' sort of scandals and secret lies kind of come out. He's just such a delightful writer. So if you've not read any of Graham Norton's books, I highly recommend them because he's just so good at writing about people. He's only a few years younger than me, born in 1963, and he was born in Clondalkin in County Dublin. And he has had a life. He trained as an actor, spent a long time in America. I know I've read his autobiographies, so I know that he spent a lot of time in America working as a waiter. He did his own shows then in the UK, in Edinburgh, in the Edinburgh Fringe, a kind of drag show. He's done so many, sometimes outrageous, really late show programs on television. Nowadays, since dear old Terry Wogan died, he's become the audio presenter on the Eurovision Song Contest. His career has just been amazing, and he's also one of the judges on RuPaul's Drag Race. He's one of those people that he just seems to do so much, and he does it all with kind of humble, self-effacing Irish humour that is just him. So I was so glad when he started writing novels. I was very keen to read them, and I'm so glad I did. And I'm really, really looking forward to reading more of his stuff. So for Irish writers, I think we have to include Graham Norton. Now, just to finish with some honourable mentions, some Irish writers that I haven't read, but I really should. One of which is Oliver Goldsmith, and he wrote The Vicar of Wakefield, which is in this old book that I have, The Complete Tales of Lamb and Goldsmith, and it's one of those books that I dip into from time to time. Of course, Lamb wrote tales from Shakespeare, so Shakespeare's plays, written stories, and this has the whole text of The Vicar of Wakefield by Goldsmith. So at some point I will be reading that, and I will probably review it as well. But also other writers that I should really have a look for. Iris Murdoch, of course, James Joyce. I really should try and read some James Joyce. Now, George Bernard Shaw, of course, we should include him, but he's more well known as a playwright, and of course wrote Pygmalion, which was a play that then became the musical My Fair Lady. And of course there's the writer Maeve Binchy, slightly more up to date. Again, another writer I really feel I need to read. Frank McCourt, of course, so many others. So forgive me if I have left anybody out of your favourite Irish writers, but please do mention them in the comments box below. So I hope you found that all very interesting. If you are a person who celebrates St. Patrick's Day, then do have a good crack. I'll be doing another book list soon because the Easter holidays are coming up. So if you have any suggestions for books to read in the Easter holidays, do let me know. But do make sure that you are subscribed so that you get my notifications when my videos come up. I'm sure I will be seeing you again very, very soon. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.